G. Rose, and today we're going to talk about metamodernism again. We could say part 2. We've had some thoughts on Wallace and why Wallace does not transition via the Pale King into metamodernity. And that's because boredom is an absence where metamodernity creates a space for interiority, as Dember puts it, through an excess resulting from an oscillation, we could say, or braiding between postmodern and metamodern and modern elements to create, kind of as we talked about, to reference Alex Ebert's work, a certain phase shift where there's a Heideggerian clearing in which interiority can come out. And that also critically, this has to be designed. You can't think your way into this effect, and it's very architectural. It is very spatial. And an artist, you could say, in making a novel is indeed creating some sort of mental architecture, mental space for the reader to occupy and be changed, and so on and so forth. What I wanted to discuss today is how there's something interesting to me about metamodernism, as Dember talks about it, as a alignment with sociology, and actually what we learn in sociology. Metamodern. It's a cultural realization and alignment with sociology. And what do I mean by that? I think it's very important that sociology can be seen, partly at least, as the study of things that are not real, like a rock, and yet nevertheless have causal and real impact on us. So an easy example would be money. Money is obviously a social construct, and as a social construct, you can say, well, it is fake and it doesn't matter. But try going to the store and telling the cashier that you don't believe in money, right? Everyone can be like, yeah, sure, money's paper, and yet it still organizes our lives. And that's a critical characteristic of sociology. Subjects of sociology is that they're in this kind of between space of what is real and what is fake. And yet in that between space, they have causal impact. They have a real impact on how people live their lives, the choices they make, and so on and so forth. And also, very importantly, if these social constructs lose authority, you can have chaos. You can have a collapse of society. Nothing works, and people go to war, and they start killing each other. So you have these social constructs. You could even talk about kind of the fetus and Zizek, that necessarily have to work, and yet they have to do so while simultaneously being understood as constructed, and yet weirdly in that construction being experienced as very real and very causal. The reason why I think this aligns well with metamodernity is because, and why we can almost see metamodernity as a cultural realization of the truths of sociology, is because metamodernism has a lot to do with this tension between not being able to know what is real and what is fake. And, the way Toby said it in a conversation with Linda and Greg is the idea that, if you have these spiritual experiences when you're young, if you get older and say, well, the religion is false, so were those experiences false? That can be very deconstructive and lead to nihilism. But if you're able to say, well, maybe the religion isn't true in the way I was told, but those experiences are nevertheless real. They nevertheless changed me and shaped me. It can be the move from either or to both and, as he put it. And I spoke with Greg about that. I think this is very powerful. What's very interesting is that's kind of the logic of a lot of sociological entities. Sure, the power of the judges is a social construct. They're just, they wear these black robes and look, authoritative and magical. And it's all, in a sense, arbitrary, and yet it can still have real effects on you. Like sociology, you can look at it this way. Even if you come to understand that a lot of the sociological things are constructs, they still have real impact on you. And we can kind of say metamodernism is like, hey, it's kind of a realization that we need to make a similar move for our own personal selves if we're going to, well, not go crazy, under social constructs and under social tensions social structures, and, they bring tensions, that if you can't fit with or align with can cause all sorts of issues. So, once you come to understand that, I can't necessarily say what is true and what is false. That line can be difficult to draw. I can doubt everything in a kind of Descartesian sense, and yet the emotional affect is still real. I still felt these things. Linda will talk about mysticism, and mysticism is interesting because mysticism always kind of stands in this place of you cannot categorize it, and yet it is more real in its inability to be categorized. That actually makes it almost more causally impactful on you. Well, similarly, we can struggle to categorize the reality of things like money or judicial power or government. Like, is it real? Is it not? Is it construct or not? Like, and does that even matter, right? Well, it is a construct, and yet that construct is still impactful, right? So I think, honestly, when we've had a culture that has really thought of things primarily, is it true or is it false, modernity, or, there are no meta-narratives, postmodernity, this is culturally situated us really not to be able to understand sociology or to even get what sociology is or how sociological things operate. And this is a problem because if, C. Mills in his book, The Sociological Imagination, he talks about how so much of freedom depends on the ability of the individual to understand or have some sort of framing of the intersection between history or biography as a language or society and the individual. And if you have no way to really understand how the society works, that right there is going to hurt your ability to see how the individual should work with society or find their fittedness in society. But if instead, following the metamodern understanding, you go, well, it's possible for something to be in a metaxis between real and false, but have a very concrete causal impact. Likewise, a religion can be metaxis between true and false, or I simply don't know, and yet that have a real emotional and personal impact on me. Once you kind of understand that the choice isn't true or false, but metaxis, and Dember certainly stresses metaxis for his understanding of metamodernism. The meta can be seen as metaxis, which, obviously Desmond also talks about, William Desmond, as Luber introduced me to. Well, then we can kind of have a way of thinking about culture and how culture works on us and how we think about ourselves that actually better aligns with how society works. And if we have that alignment, I think modes of freedom, there are more modes of freedom that become available to us because we can better understand what's going on. We have better frameworks. We have a better way of seeing what is happening. And if we can better understand the situation, then that opens conditions of possibility that otherwise would not be there. So there's something about metamodernity that is a realization, a cultural realization of the truth of sociology or how sociology works. And we could almost say that before metamodernism, culture and the ideas and et cetera that it brought was out of alignment with the truth of sociology. And perhaps this has contributed to, trade-off sociology or tragic sociology, as I call it, falling into conspiratorial sociology, which I've talked with Dave at Theory Underground about, which has kind of, unfortunately, in my opinion, ruined sociology or gotten in the way of people seeing its value. But metamodernity can be a certain disposition, a personal and emotional disposition that actually makes us better able to approach sociology and to understand what it is talking about. And as we talk about at the beginning of Belonging Again 2.1, and also talk about at Theory Underground, if it is the case that in the 1850s we basically chose capital instead of the social to organize our lives because the social was too existentially demanding, and we are now at the point where the capital is transitioning into AI at the possible end of true history, as we talk about the end of Belonging Again 2.1, then we have to recover the social. We have to recover it and go down that direction, or else will be effaced. Humanity will be replaced versus extended, as I like to talk about with Ivan Illich all the time. This all has to be expounded upon in Belonging Again Part 2. But basically the idea is we have to recover the ability to organize ourselves in terms of human relations, social relations, not continue to outsource to capital. And if that is the case, the likelihood we will be able to recover the social if we are actually culturally not aligned with the thinking of which defines or can best capture how the social operates, then I think this recovery effort is less likely to work. But if there's something about now that must recover this then I don't think it's by chance that you have this metamodernity that is arising and organically formulating and moving through arts and creators. And we're in Greg Dember's debt for helping us see it and understand it, because there is a certain freedom that comes from theory. Because if you can theorize the situation, you're more likely not to be controlled by the situation. Sure, it will still influence you and you can't wish it away, but you'll be more likely to well maneuver yourself in the currents of the moment, which is, I think, extremely important. For more of Greg Dember's work, please read his book, Say Hello to Metamodernism. You can check out his conversations on YouTube. And thank you so much for your time.